Copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act 1976. Allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, scholarship, and research. Fair use is a use permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. Nonprofit, educational, or personal use tips the balance in favor of fair use.
The Mask 3 is imagined as a continuation of the legendary comedy fantasy franchise that began in the United States in the mid-1990s and became famous worldwide for its unique blend of cartoon logic, supernatural mythology, slapstick comedy, and emotional storytelling. The franchise itself originated from American comic books published by Dark Horse Comics and was first brought to life on screen by New Line Cinema, a major Hollywood studio. The original film, released in 1994, transformed Jim Carrey into a global superstar and established the Mask as a cultural icon known for its green face, exaggerated expressions, reality-bending humor, and chaotic charm. Over time, fans have continued to ask for a true sequel that honors the spirit of the first film, and The Mask 3 is often discussed as that long-awaited continuation. In concept, The Mask 3 would be an American live-action comedy fantasy film produced in Hollywood, intended for a global audience. The story would once again revolve around the ancient mystical mask inspired by Norse mythology, believed to be connected to the trickster god Loki. This artifact does not simply give superpowers, it removes all social limits, fear, and restraint from the person wearing it, allowing their inner personality to explode into a living cartoon. Unlike traditional superhero stories, the power of the mask is psychological and emotional, amplifying both creativity and chaos. This core idea remains the heart of the franchise and would continue to be central in The Mask 3. The overall tone of The Mask 3 is generally imagined as a balance between modern humor and nostalgic energy. It would combine the exaggerated physical comedy of the original film with more mature themes about identity, responsibility, legacy, and self-control. Rather than being only a comedy, the film would explore what it truly means to hold unlimited power without consequences, and how such power can be both liberating and destructive. The movie would be set in a contemporary American city, reflecting modern society, technology, and culture, while still maintaining the timeless fantasy atmosphere that defines the Mask universe. The story would likely begin years after the events of the original film, acknowledging that the mask has existed for centuries and has passed through many hands. Stanley Ipkiss, now older and wiser, may have distanced himself from the mask, understanding the danger it poses if misused. The mask itself, however, cannot be destroyed and inevitably finds its way back into the world. Its reappearance would trigger a chain of events that brings chaos, laughter, and danger back into the city. Whether Stanley is directly involved again or serves as a mentor figure, the film would respect his legacy while allowing the story to evolve. The central plot would focus on the mask falling into the hands of a new character, possibly someone struggling with modern pressures such as social invisibility, emotional repression, or a lack of purpose. This character would represent a new generation, someone whose inner desires are magnified when they wear the mask. As with previous wearers, the transformation would be instant and extreme, turning an ordinary individual into a reality-bending force of nature. The film would explore how the mask adapts to modern times, incorporating contemporary humor, technology-driven chaos, and new forms of expression while keeping the classic cartoon logic intact. As the new mask wreaks havoc, the story would gradually reveal that the artifact's power is attracting dangerous attention. Law enforcement, criminal organizations, and possibly supernatural forces would begin hunting the mask, each wanting to control its abilities. This would create escalating conflict, blending action sequences with comedic set pieces that defy physics, logic, and reality itself. Cars might stretch like rubber, buildings could dance, and everyday environments would transform into living cartoons whenever the mask is active. These scenes would pay tribute to classic animation while using modern visual effects to push creativity even further. Emotionally, The Mask 3 would not just be about chaos and laughter. It would also examine the consequences of losing oneself to unchecked freedom. The mask does not create a new personality, it reveals what already exists inside the wearer. This idea would be explored deeply, showing how the mask can expose insecurities, hidden desires, suppressed anger, and unfulfilled dreams. The protagonist's journey would involve learning when to let go and when to take responsibility, making the story relatable beneath its exaggerated surface. The cast of The Mask 3, if it were officially produced, would likely mix returning legacy characters with fresh faces. Jim Carrey's involvement has been discussed publicly over the years, with the actor stating that he would consider returning if the story were meaningful and creatively exciting. If he were to return, his role might be more reflective and controlled, offering guidance rather than being the main source of chaos. Cameron Diaz has also expressed interest in returning only if Jim Carrey is involved, suggesting that the original chemistry remains important to fans and creators alike. New characters would be essential to carry the narrative forward. A younger lead would likely become the primary wearer of the mask, bringing a new comedic style while honoring the original spirit. Supporting characters could include investigative journalists, law enforcement officers, or eccentric historians who understand the mask's mythological origins. A primary antagonist might be someone who wants to weaponize the mask, turning its playful chaos into controlled destruction, creating a philosophical clash between freedom and control. From a production standpoint, The Mask 3 would almost certainly be produced in the United States by a major Hollywood studio, most likely Warner Brothers or New Line Cinema, which handled the original film. The budget would be significantly higher than the 1994 original due to advancements in visual effects and audience expectations. Modern CGI would allow for more elaborate transformations while still preserving the hand-drawn animation feel that made the original unique. The challenge would be to avoid over-polishing the effects and maintain the raw, energetic charm that defined the franchise. The director chosen for such a project would need a strong understanding of both comedy and fantasy. Timing, performance, and visual rhythm are crucial in a mask film, as the humor relies heavily on exaggerated expressions, fast pacing, and unexpected visual gags. The writing team would also play a critical role, ensuring that the script balances absurd humor with emotional depth, nostalgia with innovation, and chaos with structure. In terms of release expectations, The Mask 3 has no confirmed release date because it has not been officially announced. However, industry speculation often imagines a theatrical release followed by global streaming distribution, reflecting modern viewing habits. Marketing would heavily rely on nostalgia, viral clips, teaser visuals, and references to iconic moments from the original film. Any official trailer would likely break the internet due to long-standing fan interest. At present, all trailers circulating online claiming to be for The Mask 3 are fan-made or AI-generated and not official. These trailers often reuse footage from other films or digitally recreate Jim Carrey's appearance. While they show how strong the fan demand is, they should not be mistaken for real promotional material. An official trailer, if ever released, would come directly from the studio with verified branding and announcements. The cultural impact of the Mask franchise remains strong even decades later. The character's image is still widely recognized, referenced in memes, costumes, animation, and popular culture. A third film, if handled correctly, could reintroduce the character to a new generation while satisfying longtime fans. It would need to respect the intelligence of its audience, avoiding lazy humor and instead focusing on creative storytelling, visual imagination, and character growth. Ultimately, The Mask 3 exists today as a powerful idea rather than a confirmed movie. It represents the desire for a meaningful continuation rather than a cash-grab sequel. Fans want a story that understands why the original film worked so well, not just because it was funny, but because it was fearless, inventive, and emotionally sincere beneath the madness. If The Mask 3 ever becomes reality, its success would depend on honoring that legacy while daring to evolve. The Mask 3 is imagined as a bold return to a universe where imagination has no limits and reality bends to the will of emotion and desire. The film is conceived as a modern continuation of the legendary American comedy fantasy franchise that began in the 1990s and left a permanent mark on popular culture. At its core, the story once again revolves around the ancient mystical mask, an artifact of immense power that has traveled through centuries, civilizations, and countless owners, each leaving behind traces of chaos and legend. The movie is rooted in American cinema and storytelling, developed within Hollywood's tradition of blending spectacle with character-driven narratives. The creative vision behind The Mask 3 focuses on honoring the original film's spirit while updating its themes for a new generation. It acknowledges that the world has changed, humor has evolved, and audiences now seek stories that offer depth alongside entertainment. This sequel is imagined not just as a comedy, but as a reflection on freedom, restraint, and the cost of living without limits. The story begins in a contemporary urban setting, a city shaped by technology, fast-paced life, and emotional isolation. In this environment, the mask re-emerges after years of being hidden or forgotten. Its return is quiet at first, almost accidental, emphasizing the idea that great power often enters the world unnoticed. The mask does not choose heroes or villains, it simply finds those who are emotionally vulnerable, creatively suppressed, or desperate to be seen. As the narrative unfolds, a new central character becomes the mask's latest wearer. This character is not inherently evil or heroic but deeply human, struggling with identity, invisibility, and unfulfilled potential. When the mask is worn, it unleashes a transformation that is both exhilarating and terrifying. The character's body language, voice, and behavior shift into a hyper-expressive, cartoon-like force that defies physics, logic, and social rules. The transformation sequences are imagined as visual spectacles that blend modern visual effects with classic animation-inspired exaggeration. The mask allows the wearer to reshape reality according to impulse, turning streets into stages, objects into living props, and danger into comedy. These moments are filled with energy and creativity, but beneath the laughter lies a growing sense of instability, as the wearer begins to lose control over where the mask ends and their true self begins. The story carefully explores the psychological impact of the mask. It does not simply grant power, it removes inhibition, magnifying desires that were once hidden. Confidence becomes arrogance, humor becomes recklessness, and freedom turns into addiction. The wearer starts to rely on the mask to feel alive, creating tension between who they are with it and who they are without it. Meanwhile, the mask's activity attracts attention. Authorities notice unexplained events, criminals see opportunity, and individuals with knowledge of ancient myths recognize the signs of the artifact's return. This creates multiple layers of conflict, blending action with mystery. The mask is no longer just a source of personal chaos, it becomes a symbol of uncontrollable power that others seek to exploit. A legacy character from the original story, imagined as an older and wiser Stanley Ipkiss, exists on the edge of this chaos. He understands the mask better than anyone and knows the cost of wearing it. His presence brings emotional weight to the story, representing experience, regret, and hard-earned wisdom. Rather than dominating the narrative, he serves as a reminder of what the mask can take away as easily as it gives. The relationship between the new wearer and the legacy character is central to the emotional arc of the film. Through conversations and confrontations, the story contrasts youthful recklessness with mature understanding. This dynamic allows the film to explore generational differences, particularly how power and responsibility are viewed in a modern context. As the plot progresses, the tone gradually shifts from pure comedy to a balance of humor and consequence. The wearer's actions begin to have real effects on the world around them. Relationships are strained, trust is broken, and the line between performance and destruction becomes dangerously thin. The mask's magic, once thrilling, starts to feel like a trap. The antagonist of the story is imagined not just as a single villain but as an opposing philosophy. This force believes that power should be controlled, weaponized, and directed rather than freely expressed. Whether represented by an individual, an organization, or a system, this opposition challenges the chaotic freedom of the mask with rigid order and ambition. The film's climax builds toward a confrontation that is both physical and emotional. The battle is not simply about who controls the mask, but about what kind of world should exist with such power in it. The visual spectacle reaches its peak here, with reality bending in extreme ways, while the emotional stakes force the characters to confront their deepest fears. In the final act, the wearer must make a choice that defines their character. The mask offers escape, confidence, and limitless expression, but at the cost of authenticity and control. Letting go of the mask becomes an act of courage rather than weakness, reinforcing the theme that true strength comes from self-acceptance, not domination. The resolution of the story emphasizes growth rather than destruction. The mask does not disappear forever, because it is part of a larger myth that cannot be erased. Instead, it is hidden, protected, or passed on with greater understanding, leaving the door open for future stories without undermining the conclusion. Visually, The Mask 3 is imagined as a celebration of color, motion, and exaggerated performance. The filmmakers would aim to preserve the expressive physical comedy that made the original iconic, while using modern techniques to enhance rather than replace it. Practical effects, expressive acting, and stylized CGI would work together to maintain authenticity. Musically, the film would blend energetic jazz-inspired elements with modern cinematic scoring, reflecting the dual nature of the mask as both playful and dangerous. Sound design would play a crucial role, using cartoon-like effects alongside realistic audio to create a unique tonal balance. From a cultural perspective, The Mask 3 is envisioned as a commentary on modern identity. In a world dominated by social media personas and digital masks, the story becomes more relevant than ever. It asks whether removing all filters truly reveals who we are, or whether it exposes something we are not ready to face. The audience experience is designed to be both entertaining and reflective. Laughter is constant, but it is paired with moments of silence and realization. The film aims to leave viewers not just amused, but thoughtful about the balance between expression and responsibility. Ultimately, The Mask 3 is imagined as a respectful continuation rather than a repetition. It does not attempt to recreate the past scene by scene, but instead builds on the ideas that made the franchise memorable. It understands that the mask itself is not the hero, but a mirror reflecting the soul of whoever dares to wear it. The emotional core of The Mask 3 is built around the idea that freedom without direction can become its own kind of prison. As the story moves forward, the new wearer begins to realize that every moment of joy created by the mask leaves behind unseen consequences. What once felt like harmless fun slowly transforms into isolation, as people around the wearer struggle to understand which version of them is real. The city itself becomes an active presence in the story. Streets, buildings, and public spaces react to the mask's energy, visually representing how one individual's unchecked power can reshape an entire environment. Ordinary locations turn surreal when the mask is active, while returning to dull realism when it is removed, emphasizing the contrast between fantasy and reality. Relationships play a critical role in grounding the narrative. Friends and loved ones of the mask wearer begin to notice changes in behavior, sensing emotional distance and unpredictability. These strained connections add tension and urgency to the story, reminding the audience that power does not exist in isolation and that personal choices ripple outward. The legacy character's past with the mask is gradually revealed through subtle moments rather than exposition. Small details, expressions, and conversations hint at regrets, missed opportunities, and lessons learned too late. This layered storytelling deepens the emotional weight of the film, allowing viewers to feel the cost of the mask without being told directly. As the antagonist's influence grows stronger, the conflict intensifies. This opposing force sees the mask not as a curse, but as a tool for dominance and control. Their pursuit is calculated and relentless, creating a sharp contrast with the unpredictable chaos caused by the mask itself. This clash between order and madness drives the narrative forward. The wearer's internal struggle becomes more visible as the mask begins to feel heavier, both physically and emotionally. Moments without the mask feel dull and empty, creating dependency. This addiction-like dynamic reflects real-world struggles with escapism, making the fantasy elements more relatable and grounded. Midway through the story, a major turning point occurs when the wearer's actions cause unintended harm. The consequences are no longer reversible with humor or exaggeration. This moment marks a shift in tone, forcing the character to confront the reality that the mask cannot fix everything and that laughter does not erase responsibility. Visually, this section of the film is imagined as darker and more intense, with sharper contrasts and more aggressive movement. The cartoon logic remains, but it is twisted, showing that even fantasy can become threatening when driven by fear or ego. The film never abandons humor, but it allows it to coexist with tension. The guidance offered by the legacy character becomes more direct at this stage. Rather than warning against the mask, they challenge the wearer to understand themselves without it. These scenes are quieter, relying on dialogue and performance rather than spectacle, providing emotional balance to the larger-than-life chaos. As the story approaches its climax, the mask itself seems almost alive, responding to emotional states rather than commands. This reinforces the idea that the mask is not just an object, but a reflection of inner truth. The more conflicted the wearer becomes, the more unstable the mask's power grows. The final confrontation is imagined as a collision of ideologies rather than just physical forces. The antagonist's desire to control reality clashes with the wearer's desire to escape it. The battlefield becomes a surreal blend of structured environments and wild, cartoon chaos, visually representing this philosophical struggle. In these moments, the mask's power reaches its peak. Time stretches, space bends, and reality fractures into exaggerated pieces. Yet amid the spectacle, the emotional focus remains firmly on the wearer's choice, reinforcing that power alone cannot decide the outcome. The climax forces the wearer to face their true fear, being ordinary. The mask has protected them from insecurity, failure, and rejection. Letting it go means accepting imperfection and vulnerability. This emotional realization becomes the true victory of the story. When the resolution begins, the chaos slowly fades, and the world returns to its natural rhythm. The absence of exaggerated color and movement feels deliberate, highlighting the beauty of simplicity. The character's growth is shown not through grand gestures, but through quiet confidence. The legacy character's journey concludes with a sense of closure. By helping someone else avoid the mistakes they once made, they find peace with their own past. This passing of wisdom reinforces the theme of growth across generations. The mask's fate is handled with ambiguity rather than finality. It is neither destroyed nor celebrated. Instead, it is placed beyond easy reach, acknowledging that temptation will always exist, but awareness can reduce its power. The film's final moments focus on normalcy, showing that life without exaggerated magic still holds meaning, joy, and creativity. The message is subtle but clear: imagination does not require supernatural tools to exist. From a tonal perspective, The Mask 3 is imagined as a blend of nostalgia and evolution. It respects the original's energy while embracing maturity. The humor adapts to modern sensibilities without losing its timeless charm. The overall pacing allows audiences to laugh freely while also reflecting on deeper themes. This balance ensures that the film appeals to both longtime fans and new viewers discovering the franchise for the first time. In the end, The Mask 3 stands as a story about choice. The mask does not define who someone is, it simply reveals what lies beneath. True identity, the film suggests, is shaped not by power, but by the decisions made when power is no longer an option. The mask had been waiting for decades, hidden in an abandoned warehouse, its presence almost imperceptible, yet radiating a quiet, dangerous energy. When it was finally discovered, the new wearer felt a surge of excitement and fear simultaneously, as if the universe had paused to watch. The transformation was instantaneous, his body stretching and contorting in impossible ways, a grin spreading across his face that was wider than any human expression should allow. Buildings warped around him, the pavement rippling like water, and streetlights bent as though laughing along. Every sound became amplified, every movement exaggerated, turning the ordinary world into a playground of surreal possibilities. Laughter erupted uncontrollably from the wearer, echoing down empty alleys and empty streets. Friends and passers-by watched in shock and awe, unsure whether to flee or join in. The mask had awoken its own chaotic intelligence, as if alive and hungry for more. The city itself seemed to respond to the mask's energy, twisting and bending in ways that defied physics and expectation, as if reality were no longer a fixed concept. Cars elongated and danced across streets, windows morphed into faces, and trees waved their branches in mock salute. The new wearer reveled in this power, feeling invincible, untouchable, and completely free of ordinary limitations. Yet, beneath the thrill, a tiny voice of doubt lingered, warning of the consequences that always followed such unchecked behavior. Moments of self-reflection clashed with bursts of absurdity, creating a tension that was both exhilarating and terrifying. The mask amplified not just actions, but emotions, turning joy into mania and confidence into arrogance. Each street became a stage for outrageous displays of power, drawing attention from those who sought to control or destroy it. In every corner, reality and imagination collided in dazzling, unpredictable ways. As the mask's influence grew, so did the attention of those who would exploit it, from shadowy organizations to criminal masterminds. Each attempted intervention was met with absurd resistance, as the wearer's chaotic energy transformed traps and plans into comedic disasters. The city became a chaotic chessboard, every pawn animated, every strategy subject to spontaneous alteration. Even law enforcement found themselves powerless, their vehicles contorting into cartoonish shapes and their voices warped by the mask's will. Friends and allies struggled to maintain connection with the wearer, who seemed both familiar and entirely alien. Emotional stakes rose alongside visual chaos, reminding everyone that laughter could not erase consequences. The mask's power was intoxicating, but the human heart beneath it began to feel the weight of responsibility. Even in victory, the cost of indulgence became impossible to ignore. The legacy figure, older and wiser, observed from the shadows, quietly weighing the risks of intervention. He had learned the lessons of the past, of a world undone by fun without foresight, and recognized the familiar thrill in the new wearer's eyes. Words were few, but guidance was present in small gestures, in a glance, in the careful placement of objects to test and challenge. The mask seemed to acknowledge the presence of this figure, pausing briefly, as if respecting the wisdom earned through experience. Tension built as the wearer encountered moments of genuine choice, where chaos could be indulged or controlled. The city itself became a mirror, reflecting the wearer's internal struggle in every distorted street and contorted building. The narrative danced between absurdity and emotional clarity, blending spectacle with depth in a way that demanded attention. Through every twist and exaggerated motion, the story reminded audiences that freedom without self-awareness carried consequences beyond imagination. The antagonist's presence became clearer as the story progressed, their plans deliberate, precise, and unyielding. Unlike the mask wearer's wild unpredictability, this figure relied on calculated manipulation and psychological pressure. Every attempt to capture the mask was met with cartoonish resistance, turning tense moments into performances of absurd creativity. Objects intended as traps became instruments of comedy, yet their underlying threat was undeniable, heightening stakes with every encounter. The wearer began to notice the danger, the mask's energy pulsating with both exhilaration and caution. Even amidst ridiculous chaos, moments of clarity surfaced, forcing reflection on the cost of power and indulgence. Emotional growth began to emerge alongside visual spectacle, a balancing act between chaos and responsibility. The city had become a living canvas, illustrating the collision between freedom and control. The wearer's internal journey intensified, as the mask amplified both strengths and insecurities to extreme degrees. Every joke carried weight, every transformation revealed hidden fears, and every chaotic display was a reflection of inner desire. Friends, allies, and bystanders became mirrors to the wearer's humanity, reminding them that the mask could not replace connection or empathy. The narrative wove emotional reflection seamlessly into wild, unpredictable sequences, blending laughter with moments of insight. The wearer experienced exhilaration and isolation simultaneously, a duality that defined the arc of their journey. Through moments of recklessness, lessons of responsibility began to emerge. The mask became a tool not just of power, but of self-discovery. The line between fantasy and reality blurred, demanding constant negotiation between impulse and awareness. A turning point arrived when the wearer's actions unintentionally caused harm, shocking them with the real-world consequences of their exaggerated freedom. Laughter gave way to guilt, joy to fear, as the chaotic antics collided with human vulnerability. The mask offered no guidance in these moments, leaving the wearer to confront consequences directly. Emotional depth increased as the realization of accountability settled in, shaping the next stage of the journey. Allies offered support and perspective, emphasizing that power could be tempered with wisdom. The city bore the marks of transformation, a visual testament to both chaos and learning. Even the antagonist recognized that unchecked energy carried unforeseen costs. The mask, for all its cartoonish delight, revealed the limits of indulgence. The climax of the story built toward an explosive confrontation that was as philosophical as it was visual. The antagonist sought to impose order on the mask's chaos, to weaponize what was meant to be playful. Every street and building became a battlefield, transformed by the mask's will into surreal landscapes. The wearer faced both physical and moral challenges, choosing between absolute indulgence and responsible mastery. Exaggerated comedy intertwined with moments of profound reflection, emphasizing the story's dual nature. Every decision carried consequences, every burst of laughter a reminder of the stakes. Emotional tension and visual spectacle reached their peak simultaneously, creating a dynamic crescendo. The city itself seemed to hold its breath as choices were made. In the resolution, the wearer found clarity, understanding that the mask's power was a reflection, not a solution. True identity could not be borrowed, stolen, or amplified without responsibility. The city slowly returned to normal, color and motion stabilizing, leaving behind faint traces of past chaos. Allies and friends reconnected, relationships mending in small, quiet gestures. Even the antagonist found limits to their control, recognizing that force alone could not dominate imagination. Lessons of moderation, responsibility, and empathy became central to the narrative's closure. The wearer embraced life beyond the mask, carrying forward growth gained through experience. The story ended with subtle hope, honoring both comedy and consequence. The final moments focused on reflection, emphasizing growth over spectacle, learning over unrestrained fun. The mask remained, dormant but ever present, a reminder that temptation would always exist. Legacy figures quietly exited the stage, leaving the new generation to navigate their choices. Humor lingered, but it was tempered with insight, giving audiences a sense of completion. The city, though changed, retained its vibrancy, showing that chaos and order coexist in cycles. Emotional resonance persisted alongside visual delight, leaving viewers both satisfied and contemplative. The wearer's journey concluded with understanding, courage, and humility, marking a full-circle moment in their arc. The mask had given chaos, but also clarity. The Mask 3, in this imagined continuation, balanced nostalgia with evolution, comedy with depth, and spectacle with humanity. Every sequence, no matter how absurd, carried emotional weight, demonstrating that even fantastical power has moral and personal consequences. Friends, allies, and adversaries were all integral to shaping the story, ensuring that relationships remained central. Visual creativity was paired with thoughtful pacing, maintaining engagement without sacrificing clarity. Themes of identity, responsibility, and freedom wove throughout, creating a cohesive narrative structure. The wearer's journey was both literal and symbolic, exploring the boundaries of expression and control. The story celebrated imagination while reinforcing the importance of choice. Humor and heart coexisted, creating a memorable cinematic experience. The interplay between chaos and control became a persistent motif, reflected in both visual effects and character interactions. Streets stretched like rubber, buildings danced, and time itself seemed malleable when the mask was active. Yet every exaggerated action was grounded by emotional stakes, reminding viewers that power alone does not define character. Allies served as anchors, keeping the wearer connected to reality. Antagonists highlighted the dangers of unchecked ambition. Comedy and tragedy existed side by side, mirroring the duality of the human experience. The city became a metaphor for the inner world of the wearer, alive and reactive. Through every sequence, the story reinforced its central truth: identity is discovered, not granted. The story's pacing allowed for both frenzied spectacle and quiet contemplation, creating rhythm and tension throughout the narrative. Each scene built upon the last, escalating stakes visually, emotionally, and philosophically. Moments of humor offered relief, while moments of reflection grounded the audience. The mask's power was exhilarating, but never without consequence. Characters evolved naturally, their growth intertwined with the chaos around them. Emotional arcs complemented the visual spectacle, ensuring the story resonated on multiple levels. Even minor characters had purpose, influencing the wearer's journey subtly but meaningfully. Every detail contributed to the film's imagined richness. The finale left viewers with a sense of balance, where laughter, reflection, and wonder coexisted harmoniously. The mask was neither villain nor hero, merely a catalyst for growth. Characters had evolved, relationships were restored, and the city had survived transformation. Emotional lessons were clear, but humor lingered, a reminder that joy and chaos are inseparable. The story suggested continuity, that life moves forward, and that imagination remains a powerful force. Spectacle had served narrative, not overshadowed it, and the audience left feeling both entertained and thoughtful. The Mask 3, in this vision, honored its predecessors while charting new territory. It celebrated creativity, choice, and the enduring appeal of extraordinary possibility. The wearer learned that every burst of freedom carried responsibility, that laughter could heal but also hurt in equal measure. Streets that once welcomed chaos now reflected the subtle consequences of past antics. A single broken window, a twisted car, a frightened passerby, all reminders that power without thought leaves marks beyond imagination. Friends whispered warnings and guidance, offering insight without judgment. The mask responded, sensing hesitation, adapting, twisting reality in new, unpredictable ways. Colors became sharper, sounds louder, movements faster, echoing the wearer's internal conflict. Each choice created ripples, not just in the city but in the wearer's understanding of self. In this dance of chaos and reflection, growth began to emerge organically. Even as danger grew, the wearer's creativity flourished, turning every challenge into opportunity for playful ingenuity. Traps set by antagonists became comic spectacles, unintended consequences of clever improvisation. Sidewalks twisted into slides, traffic cones grew legs and danced, and signs shouted warnings in exaggerated fonts. Every obstacle was a chance to laugh, to invent, to experiment with impossible motion. Yet beneath the absurdity, the stakes were real, forcing a careful balance between amusement and survival. The city itself seemed alive, responding dynamically to every whim and mistake. Observers could only marvel at the fusion of artistry and chaos. The wearer felt the exhilaration of total unpredictability, tempered by moments of genuine clarity. The legacy character watched silently, recognizing the familiar energy that once defined their own experience. Years of wisdom allowed them to guide subtly, planting lessons in small gestures rather than overt commands. A glance, a movement, a well-timed object became tools of mentorship. The wearer sometimes noticed, sometimes ignored, yet each subtle lesson sank deeper over time. Emotional stakes intertwined with visual spectacle, creating tension and resonance. The antagonist pressed closer, their precision contrasting with the mask's boundless unpredictability. Every encounter revealed more about the wearer, the mask, and the fragile balance between chaos and order. Reality became a canvas, painted by impulsive creativity and tempered insight. Moments of vulnerability punctuated the madness, reminding everyone that the mask amplified not just strength but insecurity. The wearer caught glimpses of self-doubt in reflective puddles, in warped mirrors, in flickering neon lights. Laughter mingled with fear, exhilaration with anxiety, creating a complex emotional landscape. Friends' concern became anchors, grounding the wearer amid the swirl of surreal spectacle. The antagonist exploited these vulnerabilities, creating tension that was both psychological and physical. Every challenge pushed the wearer closer to self-awareness, forcing integration of impulse and intention. Comedy and consequence wove together seamlessly, reinforcing the film's dual nature. The city's chaos mirrored the internal turbulence of the protagonist, a living extension of the story. A turning point emerged when the wearer inadvertently endangered a loved one, an innocent caught in the wake of uncontrolled power. The laughter ceased, replaced by stark realization and overwhelming responsibility. The mask pulsed, sensing fear and guilt, twisting reality to reflect emotional truth. Every exaggerated movement became heavier, every burst of creativity tinged with consequence. Allies intervened, offering support, advice, and perspective, helping the wearer navigate the delicate boundary between fun and harm. The antagonist watched, calculating, waiting for mistakes to magnify. Even the city seemed to pause, holding its breath as choice collided with destiny. Lessons of humility and restraint crystallized in the chaos of spectacle and reflection. The antagonist escalated, pushing the wearer to the limits of control and creativity, demanding absolute mastery over the mask's unpredictable power. Streets morphed into impossible arenas, cars stretched into snakes, and traffic lights danced like sentient creatures. Every step became a test, every action a statement of intent, blending comedy with danger. The wearer realized that mastery did not mean domination but understanding, learning to wield chaos responsibly. The legacy figure's teachings resonated, subtle yet indispensable, guiding decisions without overt interference. Emotional depth underpinned every absurd visual display, grounding spectacle in human experience. The city became a stage for philosophical conflict, reflecting choices, consequences, and self-discovery. Humor and danger existed simultaneously, creating tension, delight, and reflection. Moments of intimacy and reflection punctuated the chaos, giving the story weight beyond spectacle. The wearer shared quiet conversations with friends, revealing vulnerability and self-doubt behind the mask's wild antics. Each revelation deepened character, reinforcing that connection and empathy matter even amidst extraordinary power. The mask responded, amplifying emotion, stretching reality into forms that mirrored internal states. Scenes of laughter and tragedy overlapped seamlessly, creating dynamic storytelling rhythms. Every distorted street and animated object became a visual metaphor for growth, restraint, and understanding. The antagonist's designs clashed with the wearer's choices, forcing moral and creative decision-making. The story's heart beat strongest in these moments, reminding the audience of stakes beyond physical danger. The climax approached as the antagonist attempted to seize full control of the mask, forcing a confrontation that was both spectacular and deeply symbolic. Reality twisted violently, buildings stretched and merged, and time felt elastic, each second a test of instinct and will. The wearer balanced on the edge between indulgence and responsibility, understanding that every laugh and leap carried consequence. Allies offered support, legacy guidance provided wisdom, and the city itself became an active participant in the struggle. Every choice echoed both physically and emotionally, amplifying the weight of narrative decisions. Comedy collided with philosophical reflection, blending absurdity and depth. The mask's magic seemed sentient, responding to moral clarity and impulsive whim alike. The resolution depended not on strength but on understanding, empathy, and the courage to release unchecked power. In the aftermath, the city slowly returned to normal, yet traces of past chaos remained, a permanent reminder of transformation and growth. The wearer reflected, understanding that the mask was never truly the source of power but a mirror revealing inner potential and flaw. Relationships healed, strengthened by shared trials and laughter, blending normalcy with extraordinary memory. The antagonist, defeated but not destroyed, offered a reminder that unchecked ambition remains a danger. Legacy figures observed quietly, satisfied that lessons had been passed without overt interference. The mask, dormant yet present, symbolized possibility, caution, and imagination. Humor lingered in subtle forms, echoing through streets now returned to order. Growth, self-awareness, and responsibility became the true marks of success, celebrated quietly and powerfully. The narrative concluded with a balance between chaos and order, humor and reflection, spectacle and depth. The wearer had grown, learning to wield creativity and power responsibly while honoring human relationships. The mask remained an object of fascination and caution, its presence suggesting future stories without dictating them. Emotional arcs reached closure, comedy reached resonance, and the city stood as a living testament to the journey. The audience was left exhilarated, thoughtful, and inspired, reminded that extraordinary abilities amplify humanity rather than replace it. Legacy, friendship, and personal growth emerged as central themes, intertwined with visual spectacle. The story celebrated imagination while respecting consequence, creating a cinematic experience both thrilling and meaningful. Through laughter, chaos, and reflection, The Mask 3 left its mark on both character and audience alike. The new wearer walked through the city streets, feeling the pulse of the mask with every heartbeat, as if it had become part of him. Shadows stretched unnaturally, flickering in rhythm with his emotions, and every neon sign seemed to wink knowingly. Laughter bubbled uncontrollably from his lips, echoing through alleys and empty avenues, carrying both joy and unease. Passers-by stared in disbelief as sidewalks twisted and curbs folded like paper beneath his feet. Cars morphed into serpentine shapes, sliding along in absurd harmony with the wearer's movement. Even streetlights leaned closer, their light bending to highlight his exaggerated gestures. Friends followed cautiously, caught between awe and concern, trying to interpret the balance of chaos and humanity. The mask's power was intoxicating, yet faint whispers of responsibility crept in, reminding him of unseen consequences. Every interaction became a performance, every street a stage for fantastical expression and exploration. The wearer bounced from rooftops, leaving behind trails of distorted color and sound, as if painting the city with energy. Shop windows reflected impossible versions of himself, grinning and waving from multiple angles simultaneously. Birds swooped in choreographed arcs, their motion exaggerated as if they were part of the same surreal play. Friends shouted warnings, but their voices bent into musical notes that danced along with the chaos. The mask pulsed in response, amplifying emotion and translating it into visual spectacle. Even the smallest gestures, lifting a hand, tapping a lamppost, caused reality to ripple unpredictably. Each moment tested the wearer's creativity, control, and growing understanding of power. The antagonist lurked nearby, observing every transformation with a calculating gaze, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Unlike the wearer's impulsive energy, the antagonist moved with precision, orchestrating plans that blended subtlety and threat. Their forces attempted capture, but every trap became a comedy of errors, twisted into absurdity by the mask's unpredictable magic. Vehicles flailed like animated puppets, walls bent, and everyday objects sprang to life in playful rebellion. Yet the danger beneath the comedy was undeniable, reminding the wearer that amusement alone could not protect him. Emotional stakes rose alongside visual spectacle, blending humor with palpable tension. The legacy figure remained hidden but alert, aware that guidance would soon be crucial. Every encounter sharpened the wearer's awareness, forcing growth amidst madness. At night, the city glowed with warped brilliance, neon lights stretching and twisting as the mask responded to internal emotions. Reflections in puddles multiplied, showing infinite versions of the wearer's face, each with a slightly different expression of joy, fear, or doubt. Shadows danced independently, teasing him with hints of what responsibility demanded. Friends whispered cautionary advice, their voices bending and harmonizing in unexpected ways. The wearer felt exhilaration and isolation simultaneously, the mask amplifying every sensation. Laughter turned into brief silences, introspection hidden between bursts of chaos. The antagonist moved strategically, their influence growing like a dark pulse beneath the city. Each step became a test, forcing choices that shaped both external spectacle and internal growth. Chaos collided with beauty as the wearer experimented with impossible feats of imagination, twisting reality into visual poetry. Cars curled into spirals, street signs flexed like rubber, and the ground itself rippled beneath energetic leaps. Even minor objects responded, pens danced in midair, newspapers folded themselves into tiny origami creatures. Friends and bystanders marveled, torn between fear and awe, their own emotions mirrored and amplified. The mask responded to internal intent, translating desire and anxiety into physical manifestation. Lessons of control emerged subtly as moments of unchecked play began to threaten unintended targets. Emotional clarity developed alongside growing skill, teaching the wearer when to act and when to hesitate. The city itself seemed alive, a dynamic canvas reflecting personality, choice, and consequence. A critical turning point arrived when an unintended accident occurred, causing distress to someone the wearer cared about deeply. Laughter ceased instantly, replaced by shock and overwhelming guilt, a stark reminder of the mask's dual nature. Friends rushed to help, grounding the wearer in reality, offering perspective, empathy, and support. The antagonist capitalized on hesitation, pressing harder with calculated schemes and threats. The mask pulsed, sensing fear and remorse, twisting the environment into chaotic reflections of internal turmoil. Streets bent violently, lights flickered, and objects moved unpredictably, reflecting emotional tension. The wearer realized that true power required awareness, patience, and restraint. Every subsequent action was measured, thoughtful, and infused with intentionality. The antagonist intensified efforts, seeking not only control over the mask but dominance over the wearer's choices. Every encounter became a test of creativity, courage, and wisdom, with stakes that transcended physical danger. Streets morphed into surreal arenas, playgrounds of impossible physics and visual spectacle. Buildings stretched and danced, fountains twisted into spirals, and every passerby seemed caught in the energy's ripple. Friends and allies provided grounding advice, a tether to humanity amid the exaggerated chaos. The mask amplified thought, emotion, and instinct in unpredictable combinations. Even minor gestures produced dramatic, sometimes humorous consequences, highlighting the unpredictability of power. The wearer learned that mastery was not domination but understanding, blending fun with consequence. Moments of intimacy and reflection emerged amidst overwhelming energy, grounding the narrative in human connection. The wearer shared doubts, fears, and memories with friends, revealing vulnerability beneath the mask's exaggerated facade. Emotional honesty became a source of strength, balancing the mask's chaotic energy with empathy and insight. The antagonist's calculated maneuvers created tension, but reflection and self-awareness allowed the wearer to adapt. Streets, buildings, and objects responded dynamically, creating a living stage for learning, laughter, and growth. Humor coexisted with consequence, emphasizing that power required awareness and choice. Each decision carried weight, shaping both immediate spectacle and long-term consequence. The city, ever responsive, mirrored the wearer's evolving understanding of self and morality. The climax erupted in a surreal collision of ideals, with chaos confronting control in a visually spectacular showdown. The antagonist sought to impose structure, the wearer embraced creative freedom, and the mask responded to every emotional fluctuation. Reality bent, time stretched, and impossible physics became everyday logic. Every movement, gesture, and leap was both absurdly comedic and profoundly symbolic. Friends and legacy figures guided subtly, their influence shaping decisions without overshadowing personal growth. Emotional stakes and visual spectacle reached simultaneous peaks, blending laughter, fear, and awe. The wearer confronted the ultimate choice: indulge fully or act responsibly. The answer became a defining moment of character, strength, and understanding. In the aftermath, the city returned to semi-normalcy, scarred but alive, a testament to chaos tempered by reflection. Friends reconnected, relationships strengthened, and personal growth became tangible. The mask rested dormant, a silent reminder of power, temptation, and creativity. Lessons learned remained imprinted on the wearer, legacy figures quietly observing from the periphery. Humor lingered, subtle but persistent, echoing the exuberance of earlier chaos. The antagonist's schemes were thwarted, yet they left a lingering caution about ambition unchecked. Emotional resolution paired with visual spectacle, balancing narrative depth and entertaining fantasy. Growth, responsibility, and imagination emerged as central, enduring themes. The wearer reflected deeply, understanding that the mask's true power lay not in chaos but in the lessons it revealed. Freedom without awareness was dangerous, yet creativity and joy were essential to identity. The city, shaped by fantastical energy, became a mirror for the internal journey of growth and understanding. Friends, allies, and even adversaries played roles in shaping perspective and maturity. Laughter had value, but clarity and responsibility ensured it did not harm. The mask remained, quiet and sentient, a symbol of temptation, possibility, and choice. Emotional arcs reached closure, while comedy lingered in subtle echoes across the city. The journey had transformed both wearer and environment, leaving a lasting impact. Moments of quiet emerged as balance returned, revealing the subtle beauty of ordinary life. The wearer walked among familiar streets, noting details previously overlooked, a fluttering bird, a distant conversation, the rhythmic movement of leaves. The mask's absence, though temporary, was felt in the calm, a stark contrast to previous energy bursts. Emotional resonance grew stronger as reflection became intertwined with past exuberance. Friends shared smiles and quiet jokes, small tokens of growth and reconciliation. The antagonist retreated, temporarily contained but always a reminder of temptation. Legacy figures faded into the background, satisfied that lessons had endured without overt intervention. The city itself seemed to breathe, alive with the echoes of transformation, laughter, and choice. The wearer's understanding of power matured, seeing it as a reflection of self rather than a tool for domination. Every playful act became informed by consequence, every burst of creativity guided by insight. Friends, relationships, and city life became intertwined with personal responsibility, grounding fantasy in reality. The mask remained a symbol of temptation, inspiration, and caution, never dictating action but amplifying inner truth. Humor, chaos, and reflection coexisted, creating a dynamic rhythm to everyday life. Emotional growth became as visible as visual spectacle, demonstrating the interplay between action and consequence. The antagonist's absence allowed space for reflection, not relief, reminding that balance is continuous. The story lingered in the wearer's mind, a perpetual lesson in creativity, choice, and humanity. The city awoke to a morning that felt both familiar and altered, as if remnants of the previous night's chaos still lingered in subtle distortions. The wearer moved through the streets cautiously, aware of the mask's dormant presence, feeling its quiet pulse against his skin. Small objects twitched in response to his steps, almost imperceptibly, reminding him that nothing was truly ordinary anymore. Friends walked alongside him, sharing quiet conversation and laughter, bridging the gap between the absurd and the human. The mask had left traces, yet also offered lessons of restraint, creativity, and empathy. Even the building seemed to hum with residual energy, their walls reflecting faint, surreal glimmers. Memories of past transformations surfaced, both thrilling and humbling, shaping his sense of responsibility. Each step was measured, infused with awareness, marking the beginning of a new, deliberate journey. In cafes and alleyways, remnants of chaos still lingered, paper cranes fluttering, shadows stretching longer than light allowed, and reflections showing subtle exaggerations of reality. The wearer smiled quietly, noting how ordinary objects now felt alive in small ways, hints of the mask's influence persisting in everyday life. Friends marveled at the city's subtle whimsy, unaware of its true origin, adding their own interpretations to the playful distortions. The wearer felt a deep connection to both his inner self and the city around him, understanding that the mask's lessons were ongoing. Emotional growth intertwined with observation, humor with reflection, and spontaneity with intention. Even minor gestures became meaningful, a brushstroke on the canvas of transformed reality. The antagonist lingered in thought, plotting, yet hesitant to act without certainty. The balance of power had shifted subtly, favoring awareness over raw chaos. The mask's energy pulsed faintly as the wearer explored more daring expressions of creativity within controlled limits. Sidewalks occasionally rippled, lampposts tilted, and windows reflected improbable variations of movement, playful yet contained. Friends joined in small, harmless experiments, testing boundaries while laughing, creating moments of shared wonder. The wearer discovered joy in subtlety, seeing that small gestures could inspire laughter as powerfully as grand displays. The antagonist observed, noting that restraint could be more unpredictable than chaos. Emotional tension and insight began to dominate over spectacle, grounding the wearer's decisions. Each interaction reinforced lessons of balance, creativity, and empathy. The city had become both playground and classroom, shaping character quietly yet profoundly. Conversations in quiet corners revealed lingering fears and doubts, as friends and allies encouraged reflection alongside experimentation. The wearer realized that the mask amplified not only creativity but vulnerability, showing inner truths with startling clarity. Shadows, reflections, and objects all seemed to whisper reminders of past chaos, teaching patience, understanding, and self-control. Humor mingled with reflection, creating a rhythm of joy punctuated by introspection. Even minor gestures had amplified resonance, making awareness as potent as action. The antagonist's presence remained a looming contrast, a reminder that unchecked ambition always waits. Emotional stakes now carried equal weight to visual spectacle, blending tension with playfulness. The wearer's journey became a measured dance of expression, insight, and growth. Suddenly, an unexpected disruption jolted the wearer, forcing him to respond quickly while maintaining newfound control. Objects twisted, colors shifted, and motion exaggerated unpredictably, testing skill, focus, and judgment. Friends supported him silently, their presence anchoring creativity in reality. The antagonist attempted intervention, but subtle mastery and awareness deflected threats without overt conflict. The mask, responsive to thought and emotion, amplified precise actions rather than reckless impulses. Every choice carried visible consequence, and every movement balanced risk with artistry. The city seemed to respond to both chaos and clarity, bending yet stabilizing. Insight and exhilaration blended seamlessly, reinforcing lessons learned and strength gained. The legacy figure emerged briefly, offering subtle guidance without direct intervention, reminding the wearer of past lessons and future potential. A nod, a gesture, a seemingly trivial object conveyed meaning beyond words, shaping understanding organically. The mask pulsed softly in recognition, amplifying thought and caution instead of impulsive action. Friends provided emotional context, highlighting both humor and responsibility. The antagonist's machinations became increasingly nuanced, probing weaknesses without triggering overt conflict. The city reflected inner turbulence through subtle distortions, a visual reminder of balance and awareness. Every decision was layered, emotional and physical outcomes intertwined seamlessly. The wearer embraced a quiet confidence, understanding mastery as integration of impulse, creativity, and reflection. Nightfall transformed the city into a canvas of soft distortions and muted colors, a reflection of controlled energy. The wearer moved gracefully, aware of subtle shifts in the environment, his actions blending humor, reflection, and artistry. Friends laughed quietly, experimenting within safe boundaries, marveling at the world's playful exaggerations. The antagonist remained vigilant, testing patience, timing, and decision-making without escalating conflict overtly. The mask's energy flowed gently, responding to deliberate intent rather than raw emotion. Emotional insight guided every choice, reinforcing lessons of empathy, restraint, and creativity. The city whispered its approval in the bends of streets and reflections in windows. The wearer's journey became a rhythm of thoughtful movement, laughter, and observation, merging chaos with clarity. Unexpected challenges arose as objects moved unpredictably, responding to minor shifts in intention or emotion. The wearer learned to anticipate, adapt, and engage creatively without overstepping limits. Friends observed, learning to navigate playful distortions while supporting awareness and responsibility. The antagonist's subtle tests intensified, requiring careful thought, creativity, and emotional control. Every decision had amplified consequences, both visible and invisible, blending spectacle with insight. The mask responded to internal harmony rather than external impulse, reflecting mastery of both self and environment. The city itself seemed to breathe, alive with the wearer's deliberate interactions. Moments of tension intertwined with humor, highlighting growth, skill, and reflective understanding. The wearer experimented with controlled bursts of creativity, stretching reality just enough to delight without endangering. Sidewalks rippled playfully, fountains twisted into geometric spirals, and reflections winked with exaggerated mirth. Friends joined in small, coordinated explorations, laughing, marveling, and learning alongside the wearer. Emotional and visual storytelling blended seamlessly, creating moments both thrilling and instructive. The antagonist observed, adapting strategy to subtle shifts in behavior. The mask's responsiveness became intuitive, echoing intention rather than dictating action. Consequences became lessons, humor became guidance, and mastery became a dynamic interplay of choice. Every step was both performance and reflection, both spectacle and growth. A pivotal realization struck the wearer: true power lay not in exaggeration, but in understanding, empathy, and creativity directed with awareness. Small gestures now carried profound impact, rippling through environment and relationships alike. Friends' laughter became shared discovery rather than chaos, reinforcing connection and understanding. The antagonist recognized that subtle mastery could surpass brute force, retreating to reassess. The mask pulsed with gentle energy, amplifying insight over impulse. Emotional growth became as prominent as visual spectacle, and every moment was a balance of expression and reflection. The city became a living metaphor, embodying lessons learned from chaos, responsibility, and choice. Laughter and wonder persisted, tempered by awareness and deliberate action. The final confrontation approached in subdued anticipation, not of raw chaos but of philosophical resolution. The antagonist's plan now collided with refined insight, creating tension rooted in morality, creativity, and choice. Every street, reflection, and object responded dynamically, illustrating consequence, humor, and growth. The wearer moved with confidence, integrating lessons of restraint, empathy, and playful experimentation. Friends and legacy figures contributed quietly, ensuring guidance and reflection remained central. The mask's energy remained responsive, shaping reality subtly to highlight choice and responsibility. Emotional stakes intertwined seamlessly with visual artistry, crafting a layered, satisfying experience. Every action was a statement, every decision a reflection of maturity, creativity, and understanding. Afterward, the city settled into calm, colors softening, distortions easing, echoes of past chaos fading into memory. The wearer walked deliberately, appreciating subtle marvels left behind by playful exaggeration. Friends laughed softly, recounting small adventures, forging deeper bonds through shared experience. The antagonist retreated, temporarily contained, a reminder that balance and awareness maintain harmony over raw ambition. The mask rested quietly, dormant yet potent, a symbol of potential, reflection, and responsibility. Legacy figures observed with satisfaction, lessons passed subtly and effectively. Emotional arcs reached closure while humor lingered, merging delight and insight. The city breathed gently, alive with traces of wonder, choice, and creativity. The wearer reflected deeply, understanding that mastery was not control but the integration of freedom, empathy, and insight. Every act of laughter or creativity became mindful, respecting both environment and relationships. Friends, allies, and even subtle adversaries contributed to a dynamic, interconnected journey. The mask's presence remained a guiding force, amplifying inner truth rather than dictating action. Humor and reflection coexisted, balancing spectacle with emotional depth. The city became a living testament to growth, creativity, and responsibility. Lessons endured, subtle and profound, visible in small gestures and interactions. The wearer's journey evolved into a rhythm of deliberate joy, choice, and wonder. The final paragraphs of reflection tied together chaos, growth, and subtle mastery, leaving both the wearer and the city transformed. The mask's influence lingered, a quiet reminder of potential and responsibility. Laughter, play, and wonder persisted alongside empathy, awareness, and careful reflection. Friends and allies remained intertwined with the wearer's growth, forming bonds that anchored creativity. The antagonist, though defeated, continued to serve as a cautionary presence, illustrating the dangers of unchecked ambition. Visual spectacle and emotional resonance existed in harmony, leaving a memorable impression on both characters and environment. Every street, building, and object reflected lessons learned, integrating chaos with insight. The city, the mask, and the wearer were now in delicate balance, ready for new adventures shaped by choice, wisdom, and imagination. The city hummed with the quiet energy of past chaos, streets stretching subtly as if remembering every leap, twist, and laugh. The wearer moved carefully, feeling the mask's dormant pulse, a reminder that even quiet moments could ripple unpredictably. Small objects responded in tiny ways, a leaf twirling in midair, a stray newspaper folding itself like origami. Friends walked alongside him, their conversation gentle, laughter soft but genuine, grounding him in shared experience. The mask had become a part of him, not just a tool, reflecting personality, choice, and emotion. Shadows danced faintly, mirroring subtle shifts in mood, stretching long or shrinking unexpectedly. Emotional awareness had grown, blending creativity with responsibility in every action. Even the city itself seemed alive with memory, reflection, and potential. Morning brought soft light and subtle distortions, windows flickering with improbable reflections, colors slightly richer, more playful. The wearer moved with cautious excitement, experimenting within safe limits, testing small bursts of creativity. Sidewalks rippled gently beneath his feet, lampposts leaned toward him in whimsical acknowledgement. Friends joined in quiet amusement, their presence reinforcing balance and shared joy. The antagonist lingered, observing, waiting for mistakes without overt interference. The mask pulsed softly, amplifying intention over impulse, encouraging insight and precision. Lessons learned in chaos were now applied in subtle, controlled ways. Every small movement carried weight, joy, and responsibility intertwined seamlessly. The wearer's confidence grew as subtle creativity expanded, bending reality just enough to delight without danger. Signs, fountains, and reflections responded dynamically, echoing internal thought and emotion. Friends laughed quietly, exploring playful distortions together, marveling at tiny bursts of controlled whimsy. The antagonist's plans became less threatening, challenged by mastery tempered with awareness. Emotional stakes guided each action, balancing thrill with careful reflection. Even the city seemed to breathe with recognition, streets pulsing gently with residual energy. Every gesture, step, and glance now held meaning, reinforcing growth, responsibility, and creativity. Awareness became second nature, a natural extension of joy and imagination. Unexpected challenges arose when small objects moved unpredictably, testing observation, reaction, and adaptation. The wearer responded with measured creativity, turning potential chaos into controlled artistry. Friends offered subtle support, laughter blending with insight to guide decisions. The antagonist's probing became subtle, psychological, a test of patience and ingenuity rather than raw force. The mask responded intuitively, amplifying deliberate intention rather than chaotic impulse. Consequences were immediate and visible, teaching lessons while maintaining humor and spectacle. The city itself reflected the wearer's growing mastery, every distorted reflection a mirror of understanding. Growth, creativity, and awareness intertwined, producing both amusement and reflection. Moments of quiet reflection punctuated active experimentation, reinforcing lessons of restraint and empathy. The wearer noticed subtle exaggerations in reflections, playful distortions in minor objects, and the faint echo of past chaos. Friends shared small discoveries, exploring these subtle quirks with delight and curiosity. The antagonist remained vigilant, testing timing, patience, and emotional control without overt aggression. Emotional growth continued, guiding every choice with awareness and insight. The mask became a companion, responding to thought rather than whim, amplifying clarity over impulsiveness. Streets, walls, and reflections all whispered reminders of previous lessons, shaping present action. Every decision reflected integration of experience, creativity, and responsibility. Evening brought a soft glow, light bending faintly, shadows stretching in gentle exaggeration. The wearer explored subtle bursts of creativity, each step measured, deliberate, and infused with joy. Friends followed, experimenting within safe boundaries, laughing and learning together. The antagonist's strategy adapted, testing subtle cues and decision-making without escalating conflict. The mask responded gently, amplifying insight and precise control rather than reckless power. Emotional resonance guided action, balancing spectacle with reflection. The city pulsed softly with energy, alive yet stable, responsive to careful movement. Every gesture reinforced lessons learned, blending imagination, responsibility, and human connection. Small bursts of playful exaggeration entertained without harm, signs wiggling, fountains twisting gently, reflections shimmering with whimsy. Friends explored alongside, sharing laughter, surprise, and quiet insight, deepening bonds. The antagonist monitored, recognizing subtle mastery, cautious of underestimating the wearer's growth. Emotional awareness guided decisions, transforming chaos into playful artistry. The mask responded to thought, intention, and reflection, shaping reality into meaningful spectacle. Every interaction carried significance, reinforcing empathy, creativity, and responsibility. Streets, walls, and skies mirrored internal growth, connecting action with consequence. Joy, awareness, and reflection blended seamlessly, creating a harmonious rhythm. A sudden minor disruption tested the wearer's mastery, objects responding unpredictably to subtle shifts in focus or mood. The wearer adapted instantly, guiding chaos into playful forms without harm. Friends laughed quietly, supporting and observing, reinforcing the balance between whimsy and awareness. The antagonist's subtle probing created tension without overt threat, testing skill, patience, and judgment. The mask pulsed in alignment with deliberate intention, amplifying insight over impulsive energy. Emotional stakes intertwined with spectacle, creating meaningful, dynamic experiences. The city reflected the wearer's mastery, responding gracefully to every decision. Awareness and creativity merged, ensuring that humor and growth coexisted harmoniously. Subtle reflection deepened understanding, as the wearer recognized the true nature of power and responsibility. Every burst of creativity now carried insight, every playful exaggeration had purpose. Friends provided emotional anchors, guiding the wearer's actions and reinforcing lessons. The antagonist acknowledged the effectiveness of controlled mastery, reassessing strategies accordingly. The mask remained a responsive, sentient partner, amplifying thought rather than dictating action. Streets and objects mirrored internal growth, reflecting balance and awareness. Emotional depth and humor intertwined, creating a layered, meaningful narrative. Every choice reinforced personal growth, connection, and imagination. The city's quiet energy hinted at latent possibility, streets humming faintly with memory, anticipation, and playful distortion. The wearer moved deliberately, aware of subtle environmental responses, enjoying controlled bursts of creativity. Friends shared laughter and insight, exploring small experiments with delight and responsibility. The antagonist observed from a distance, calculating influence without aggressive action. The mask pulsed faintly, reinforcing deliberate choice, empathy, and awareness. Objects, reflections, and shadows became interactive participants, responding dynamically to thought. Emotional resonance guided every action, balancing spectacle with maturity. Growth, humor, and responsibility fused, creating a harmonious rhythm of power and awareness. The wearer's mastery became intuitive, a blend of creative energy, emotional insight, and deliberate choice. Streets and objects responded subtly, amplifying imagination without overwhelming consequence. Friends engaged, exploring playfulness safely, learning, and laughing together. The antagonist's presence remained, a cautionary symbol of ambition unchecked. The mask responded fluidly, amplifying thought, awareness, and intentional action. Emotional stakes and visual spectacle intertwined, teaching lessons in creativity, responsibility, and empathy. Every step reflected growth, awareness, and balance, demonstrating harmony between chaos and insight. The city thrived as a living canvas of playful mastery and deliberate care. Even as night fell, the city glowed faintly, the soft light bending in playful exaggeration, reflections shimmering with subtle whimsy. The wearer practiced gentle experimentation, testing creativity within controlled boundaries. Friends shared quiet joy, their laughter reinforcing growth and responsibility. The antagonist watched silently, their strategy tempered by respect for the wearer's evolving skill. The mask pulsed softly, a partner in reflection, amplifying awareness over impulsiveness. Every gesture and decision resonated with consequence and insight. The city mirrored internal mastery, subtle distortions highlighting choice, empathy, and creativity. Humor, reflection, and growth intertwined seamlessly, leaving a harmonious, magical rhythm in every step. The city seemed to breathe softly under the early morning light, its streets alive with faint echoes of past chaos, hints of playful distortions lingering in windows and puddles. The wearer walked slowly, sensing the mask's subtle pulse beneath his skin, a quiet reminder of power tempered by awareness. Small objects responded gently to his presence, a paper fluttering, a street sign tilting slightly, as if the city itself recognized him. Friends walked alongside, sharing laughter that was measured, deliberate, human, balancing whimsy with responsibility. Shadows stretched and contracted in curious patterns, following without fully obeying the laws of reality. The wearer felt a profound connection between inner intent and external world, a harmony born of experience. Every gesture, every glance, became meaningful, threading together humor, reflection, and insight. Even ordinary corners of the city seemed charged with possibility, waiting to respond to imagination. Soft sunlight illuminated subtle exaggerations in familiar streets, reflections winking playfully in shop windows, corners slightly warped with surreal flair. The wearer experimented with small, controlled bursts of creativity, guiding motion in ways that delighted without overwhelming. Friends laughed quietly, discovering tiny marvels together, their shared joy reinforcing bonds and understanding. The antagonist watched from afar, calculating, probing, testing patience and intuition without direct confrontation. The mask responded fluidly, amplifying thought and emotion rather than chaotic impulse, creating a delicate dialogue between wearer and world. Every choice carried layered consequences, visible in subtle environmental reactions and emotional resonance. The city itself mirrored lessons of restraint, insight, and empathy, dynamic and responsive. Growth and humor intertwined seamlessly, creating a rhythm of learning and playful mastery. Unexpected minor disruptions arose, objects twisting or floating in response to unseen currents of intention, testing the wearer's awareness and adaptability. He responded instinctively, balancing creativity with caution, turning potential chaos into controlled spectacle. Friends engaged alongside, laughter mingling with subtle guidance, reinforcing insight and responsibility. The antagonist's subtle maneuvers tested perception and strategy, yet the wearer's mastery held firm. The mask pulsed gently, amplifying deliberate thought, translating clarity into motion. Every street, corner, and object seemed to participate in this delicate dance, reflecting lessons learned. Humor, spectacle, and emotional resonance wove together in an intricate rhythm. Awareness and creativity became second nature, blending action, reflection, and joy effortlessly. Evening approached, and the city glimmered under soft, warped lighting, reflections stretching gently in playful exaggeration. The wearer explored controlled creativity, bending reality just enough to surprise and delight without harm. Friends followed closely, experimenting safely, sharing insight, and deepening connection through laughter. The antagonist observed, cautious and calculating, aware that subtle mastery often outweighed raw chaos. The mask pulsed in tune with deliberate intention, amplifying insight over reckless energy, a silent partner in measured experimentation. Emotional resonance guided each step, balancing spectacle with reflection, action with awareness. The city responded dynamically, a living canvas shaped by intention and observation. Every decision reflected growth, creativity, and empathy, establishing a rhythm of harmony and playful mastery. A sudden minor challenge appeared, a street object moved unpredictably, threatening to disrupt balance. The wearer adapted instantly, guiding it with precision, laughter, and insight, transforming potential chaos into a whimsical display. Friends watched, quietly supportive, their presence grounding experimentation in shared responsibility. The antagonist's subtle testing continued, probing awareness, creativity, and emotional judgment without overt aggression. The mask pulsed in response to thought, intention, and reflection, amplifying awareness and precise control. Consequences were immediate, visible, yet playful, blending insight and spectacle. The city mirrored the wearer's mastery, reacting gracefully, acknowledging growth. Humor and reflection merged, creating a dynamic interplay of learning, creativity, and joy. Small bursts of creativity became lessons in restraint, the wearer learning that subtlety often produced stronger results than flamboyance. Street signs, fountains, and reflections responded fluidly, each gesture carrying meaning. Friends laughed and discovered alongside him, exploring playful possibilities safely, sharing insight and amusement. The antagonist noted mastery, recognizing the wearer's evolution without escalating conflict. Emotional stakes guided choices, teaching responsibility through dynamic interaction with surroundings. The mask became a reflective partner, responding intuitively to deliberate thought and controlled energy. Streets and objects became extensions of insight and awareness, interactive and alive. Every act reinforced growth, humor, and emotional intelligence, blending spectacle with reflection. The wearer discovered that true power lay not in exaggeration but in intention, empathy, and creative awareness. Small movements rippled outward, subtle distortions echoing in windows, puddles, and objects. Friends explored carefully, laughter and insight merging, forming bonds of understanding and delight. The antagonist observed subtly, recalculating approach, recognizing mastery over raw chaos. The mask pulsed lightly, amplifying insight, guiding action, translating thought into movement. The city mirrored lessons of restraint and imagination, a responsive, living classroom. Emotional resonance shaped behavior, intertwining spectacle with learning. Joy, responsibility, and creativity coexisted harmoniously, demonstrating mastery of self and environment. Night arrived, streets glowing with gentle warped light, reflections shimmering softly, exaggerations subtle yet captivating. The wearer tested minor creative impulses, each step measured, deliberate, intentional. Friends joined, their quiet laughter harmonizing with subtle distortions, amplifying both joy and insight. The antagonist observed, cautiously probing skill, judgment, and patience without confrontation. The mask responded fluidly, amplifying deliberate thought, enhancing clarity and precision. Streets, shadows, and reflections participated dynamically, reflecting mastery and awareness. Emotional stakes merged with visual play, creating tension and delight in balance. Every gesture reinforced lessons of creativity, empathy, and responsibility, intertwining spectacle with growth. Moments of reflection deepened understanding, the wearer recognizing that mastery was integration of awareness, choice, and creativity. Every playful act carried layered consequence, every subtle exaggeration had purpose. Friends provided quiet guidance and companionship, reinforcing insight and balance. The antagonist respected measured skill, observing from a distance without direct interference. The mask pulsed in harmony with thought, translating clarity into controlled, playful energy. Streets and objects mirrored inner growth, blending humor, reflection, and intention. Every interaction carried meaning, reinforcing empathy, creativity, and responsibility. The city became a living testament to lessons learned and subtle mastery achieved. The wearer's intuition sharpened, each movement precise, creative, and deliberate, blending action and reflection seamlessly. Subtle distortions of streets, objects, and shadows responded dynamically, amplifying insight and intention. Friends laughed quietly, participating safely, reinforcing understanding and awareness. The antagonist's presence remained a cautionary counterpoint, a reminder of unchecked ambition. The mask responded sensitively to thought and emotion, amplifying clarity over impulse. Emotional resonance guided action, balancing spectacle with personal growth. Every street, building, and object reflected mastery, responsibility, and creativity. Humor, reflection, and insight merged, creating a harmonious, living rhythm. The city pulsed softly under the wearer's controlled energy, minor distortions enhancing whimsy without chaos. The wearer moved deliberately, experimenting in measured bursts, exploring creativity responsibly. Friends followed, sharing insight, laughter, and reflection, deepening connection and understanding. The antagonist watched silently, appreciating skill, patience, and awareness without acting overtly. The mask pulsed gently, echoing thought, amplifying precision, and translating intention into playful effect. Streets and objects mirrored inner growth, every gesture a lesson, every movement meaningful. Emotional and visual storytelling intertwined, guiding behavior, teaching responsibility, and reinforcing empathy. Mastery was evident in every interaction, a blend of creativity, awareness, and joy. Soft morning light returned, illuminating subtle residual distortions, reflections shimmering faintly in windows and puddles. The wearer moved with calm awareness, each step a balance of creativity, insight, and intentionality. Friends laughed gently, exploring playful expressions within safe boundaries, learning, and enjoying discovery. The antagonist remained distant, observing skill, subtlety, and mastery, reassessing strategies without interference. The mask pulsed quietly, reflecting deliberate thought, amplifying awareness, and shaping interaction. Streets, objects, and reflections responded fluidly, a living testament to growth, creativity, and responsibility. Every gesture reflected humor, insight, and reflection, blending spectacle with maturity. The city, the wearer, and friends existed in a delicate harmony, prepared for future adventures shaped by wisdom, imagination, and choice. The city seemed to breathe softly under the early morning light, its streets alive with faint echoes of past chaos, hints of playful distortions lingering in windows and puddles. The wearer walked slowly, sensing the mask's subtle pulse beneath his skin, a quiet reminder of power tempered by awareness. Small objects responded gently to his presence, a paper fluttering, a street sign tilting slightly, as if the city itself recognized him. Friends walked alongside, sharing laughter that was measured, deliberate, human, balancing whimsy with responsibility. Shadows stretched and contracted in curious patterns, following without fully obeying the laws of reality. The wearer felt a profound connection between inner intent and external world, a harmony born of experience. Every gesture, every glance, became meaningful, threading together humor, reflection, and insight. Even ordinary corners of the city seemed charged with possibility, waiting to respond to imagination. Soft sunlight illuminated subtle exaggerations in familiar streets, reflections winking playfully in shop windows, corners slightly warped with surreal flair. The wearer experimented with small, controlled bursts of creativity, guiding motion in ways that delighted without overwhelming. Friends laughed quietly, discovering tiny marvels together, their shared joy reinforcing bonds and understanding. The antagonist watched from afar, calculating, probing, testing patience and intuition without direct confrontation. The mask responded fluidly, amplifying thought and emotion rather than chaotic impulse, creating a delicate dialogue between wearer and world. Every choice carried layered consequences, visible in subtle environmental reactions and emotional resonance. The city itself mirrored lessons of restraint, insight, and empathy, dynamic and responsive. Growth and humor intertwined seamlessly, creating a rhythm of learning and playful mastery. Unexpected minor disruptions arose, objects twisting or floating in response to unseen currents of intention, testing the wearer's awareness and adaptability. He responded instinctively, balancing creativity with caution, turning potential chaos into controlled spectacle. Friends engaged alongside, laughter mingling with subtle guidance, reinforcing insight and responsibility. The antagonist's subtle maneuvers tested perception and strategy, yet the wearer's mastery held firm. The mask pulsed gently, amplifying deliberate thought, translating clarity into motion. Every street, corner, and object seemed to participate in this delicate dance, reflecting lessons learned. Humor, spectacle, and emotional resonance wove together in an intricate rhythm. Awareness and creativity became second nature, blending action, reflection, and joy effortlessly. Evening approached, and the city glimmered under soft, warped lighting, reflections stretching gently in playful exaggeration. The wearer explored controlled creativity, bending reality just enough to surprise and delight without harm. Friends followed closely, experimenting safely, sharing insight, and deepening connection through laughter. The antagonist observed, cautious and calculating, aware that subtle mastery often outweighed raw chaos. The mask pulsed in tune with deliberate intention, amplifying insight over reckless energy, a silent partner in measured experimentation. Emotional resonance guided each step, balancing spectacle with reflection, action with awareness. The city responded dynamically, a living canvas shaped by intention and observation. Every decision reflected growth, creativity, and empathy, establishing a rhythm of harmony and playful mastery. A sudden minor challenge appeared, a street object moved unpredictably, threatening to disrupt balance. The wearer adapted instantly, guiding it with precision, laughter, and insight, transforming potential chaos into a whimsical display. Friends watched, quietly supportive, their presence grounding experimentation in shared responsibility. The antagonist's subtle testing continued, probing awareness, creativity, and emotional judgment without overt aggression. The mask pulsed in response to thought, intention, and reflection, amplifying awareness and precise control. Consequences were immediate, visible, yet playful, blending insight and spectacle. The city mirrored the wearer's mastery, reacting gracefully, acknowledging growth. Humor and reflection merged, creating a dynamic interplay of learning, creativity, and joy. Small bursts of creativity became lessons in restraint, the wearer learning that subtlety often produced stronger results than flamboyance. Street signs, fountains, and reflections responded fluidly, each gesture carrying meaning. Friends laughed and discovered alongside him, exploring playful possibilities safely, sharing insight and amusement. The antagonist noted mastery, recognizing the wearer's evolution without escalating conflict. Emotional stakes guided choices, teaching responsibility through dynamic interaction with surroundings. The mask became a reflective partner, responding intuitively to deliberate thought and controlled energy. Streets and objects became extensions of insight and awareness, interactive and alive. Every act reinforced growth, humor, and emotional intelligence, blending spectacle with reflection. The wearer discovered that true power lay not in exaggeration but in intention, empathy, and creative awareness. Small movements rippled outward, subtle distortions echoing in windows, puddles, and objects. Friends explored carefully, laughter and insight merging, forming bonds of understanding and delight. The antagonist observed subtly, recalculating approach, recognizing mastery over raw chaos. The mask pulsed lightly, amplifying insight, guiding action, translating thought into movement. The city mirrored lessons of restraint and imagination, a responsive, living classroom. Emotional resonance shaped behavior, intertwining spectacle with learning. Joy, responsibility, and creativity coexisted harmoniously, demonstrating mastery of self and environment. Night arrived, streets glowing with gentle warped light, reflections shimmering softly, exaggerations subtle yet captivating. The wearer tested minor creative impulses, each step measured, deliberate, intentional. Friends joined, their quiet laughter harmonizing with subtle distortions, amplifying both joy and insight. The antagonist observed, cautiously probing skill, judgment, and patience without confrontation. The mask responded fluidly, amplifying deliberate thought, enhancing clarity and precision. Streets, shadows, and reflections participated dynamically, reflecting mastery and awareness. Emotional stakes merged with visual play, creating tension and delight in balance. Every gesture reinforced lessons of creativity, empathy, and responsibility, intertwining spectacle with growth. Moments of reflection deepened understanding, the wearer recognizing that mastery was integration of awareness, choice, and creativity. Every playful act carried layered consequence, every subtle exaggeration had purpose. Friends provided quiet guidance and companionship, reinforcing insight and balance. The antagonist respected measured skill, observing from a distance without direct interference. The mask pulsed in harmony with thought, translating clarity into controlled, playful energy. Streets and objects mirrored inner growth, blending humor, reflection, and intention. Every interaction carried meaning, reinforcing empathy, creativity, and responsibility. The city became a living testament to lessons learned and subtle mastery achieved. The wearer's intuition sharpened, each movement precise, creative, and deliberate, blending action and reflection seamlessly. Subtle distortions of streets, objects, and shadows responded dynamically, amplifying insight and intention. Friends laughed quietly, participating safely, reinforcing understanding and awareness. The antagonist's presence remained a cautionary counterpoint, a reminder of unchecked ambition. The mask responded sensitively to thought and emotion, amplifying clarity over impulse. Emotional resonance guided action, balancing spectacle with personal growth. Every street, building, and object reflected mastery, responsibility, and creativity. Humor, reflection, and insight merged, creating a harmonious, living rhythm. The city pulsed softly under the wearer's controlled energy, minor distortions enhancing whimsy without chaos. The wearer moved deliberately, experimenting in measured bursts, exploring creativity responsibly. Friends followed, sharing insight, laughter, and reflection, deepening connection and understanding. The antagonist watched silently, appreciating skill, patience, and awareness without acting overtly. The mask pulsed gently, echoing thought, amplifying precision, and translating intention into playful effect. Streets and objects mirrored inner growth, every gesture a lesson, every movement meaningful. Emotional and visual storytelling intertwined, guiding behavior, teaching responsibility, and reinforcing empathy. Mastery was evident in every interaction, a blend of creativity, awareness, and joy. Soft morning light returned, illuminating subtle residual distortions, reflections shimmering faintly in windows and puddles. The wearer moved with calm awareness, each step a balance of creativity, insight, and intentionality. Friends laughed gently, exploring playful expressions within safe boundaries, learning, and enjoying discovery. The antagonist remained distant, observing skill, subtlety, and mastery, reassessing strategies without interference. The mask pulsed quietly, reflecting deliberate thought, amplifying awareness, and shaping interaction. Streets, objects, and reflections responded fluidly, a living testament to growth, creativity, and responsibility. Every gesture reflected humor, insight, and reflection, blending spectacle with maturity. The city, the wearer, and friends existed in a delicate harmony, prepared for future adventures shaped by wisdom, imagination, and choice. The city stirred with subtle motion, every corner seeming to hold the faint memory of past chaos, ready to respond to imagination. The wearer walked with confidence, sensing the mask's quiet pulse beneath his skin, a gentle reminder of power and responsibility. Objects moved slightly at his presence, a newspaper twisting, a lamppost leaning, small acknowledgments of playful energy. Friends walked beside him, laughter soft but genuine, balancing creativity with mindfulness. Shadows stretched in unusual ways, reflecting moods and intentions, twisting and contracting as if alive. The wearer felt a growing harmony between internal impulse and external world, understanding that awareness amplified both joy and control. Every gesture carried meaning, blending humor, reflection, and empathy seamlessly. Even the smallest details of the city seemed alive, waiting to echo imagination and intent. Morning light streamed softly through streets, illuminating subtle distortions and reflections in windows and puddles. The wearer experimented with small, controlled bursts of creativity, delighting in the interaction between imagination and reality. Friends laughed, exploring minor exaggerations with care, learning the rhythm of measured chaos. The antagonist observed silently, calculating, probing for missteps without direct interference. The mask responded fluidly, amplifying deliberate intention rather than chaotic impulse, shaping every action into playful spectacle. Consequences were visible yet gentle, teaching responsibility alongside creativity. Streets, corners, and objects mirrored lessons learned, a living canvas reflecting growth. Humor, insight, and reflection intertwined, creating a harmonious balance of play and awareness. Unexpected disruptions challenged the wearer, objects moving unpredictably in response to subtle shifts in mood or thought. He adapted instantly, controlling the chaos with precision and creativity, transforming potential hazards into whimsical art. Friends supported him silently, laughter blending with guidance, reinforcing balance and insight. The antagonist's subtle maneuvers tested perception, patience, and judgment without escalating into open conflict. The mask pulsed in rhythm with deliberate thought, amplifying clarity, focus, and controlled energy. The city responded dynamically, a responsive participant in the ongoing dance of mastery and reflection. Emotional stakes intertwined with spectacle, teaching lessons in empathy and responsibility. Awareness and creativity merged naturally, establishing a continuous rhythm of playful learning. Evening draped the city in soft, warm light, shadows stretching playfully along streets and buildings. The wearer explored controlled bursts of exaggeration, bending reality just enough to surprise and delight without causing harm. Friends participated joyfully, discovering subtle marvels, laughter mixing with quiet reflection. The antagonist watched cautiously, recognizing that mastery of controlled chaos often outweighed raw impulsive energy. The mask pulsed gently, amplifying intention and awareness, responding to thought more than impulse. Every decision carried weight, shaping both spectacle and learning, reinforcing responsibility. The city itself seemed aware, streets and objects bending and responding to deliberate action. Humor, reflection, and growth blended seamlessly, a rhythm of playful mastery emerging naturally. Small challenges appeared spontaneously, objects reacting unpredictably, testing focus and adaptability. The wearer responded fluidly, guiding energy into controlled, creative expressions, turning potential disruption into delight. Friends laughed, observing, learning, and supporting, reinforcing lessons of balance and connection. The antagonist continued subtle observation, testing patience and insight, learning as much as assessing. The mask pulsed with responsive energy, amplifying deliberate thought and precise action. Consequences were immediate yet playful, visible in the environment and emotional resonance. The city itself mirrored learning, responding gracefully to guidance, reflecting skill, awareness, and creativity. Every gesture blended humor, reflection, and insight, reinforcing mastery and control. Moments of introspection deepened understanding, the wearer realizing mastery meant blending creativity with awareness and empathy. Subtle distortions responded to intention rather than impulse, reflections shimmering with meaning. Friends shared small experiments, laughter combining with quiet insight, reinforcing connection and growth. The antagonist noted the wearer's evolving skill, cautious yet impressed, reassessing approach without overt action. The mask pulsed softly, translating deliberate thought into playful energy, guiding without commanding. Streets, corners, and objects became extensions of intention, dynamic, alive, responsive. Humor and insight intertwined, reinforcing lessons of empathy, creativity, and balance. Every interaction carried significance, a blend of spectacle and personal growth. The wearer's intuition sharpened, every gesture deliberate, every movement a conscious expression of creativity and responsibility. Minor distortions of streets, reflections, and shadows responded to intention, amplifying meaning without chaos. Friends explored safely, laughter and discovery blending, deepening understanding and shared joy. The antagonist remained distant, observing, a cautionary reminder of unchecked ambition. The mask amplified awareness and thought, translating clarity into graceful, playful motion. Emotional stakes merged with visual spectacle, creating layered, meaningful experiences. Every street, object, and reflection became a mirror of growth, skill, and empathy. Humor, reflection, and insight coexisted, creating balance and harmony in motion. The city pulsed softly with latent energy, streets and alleys ready to respond to deliberate creativity. The wearer experimented, exploring controlled bursts of whimsy, balancing joy with responsibility. Friends joined in subtle interactions, learning, laughing, and reflecting together. The antagonist remained a distant shadow, calculating, cautious, aware of evolving skill. The mask responded intuitively, amplifying thought, intention, and reflection over impulse. Streets, objects, and reflections mirrored internal growth, playful distortions highlighting mastery and awareness. Emotional depth guided decisions, blending spectacle with learning seamlessly. Joy, creativity, and insight harmonized, producing a living rhythm of controlled chaos and reflection. Night fell, the city glowing softly with playful exaggerations in light and shadow, reflections shimmering with subdued whimsy. The wearer continued to explore subtle bursts of creativity, carefully measured to delight without harm. Friends shared laughter, insight, and gentle experimentation, reinforcing growth and empathy. The antagonist observed silently, testing patience and judgment without overtly interfering. The mask pulsed gently, translating deliberate thought into graceful motion, amplifying awareness. Streets and objects responded dynamically, reflecting lessons learned and subtle mastery achieved. Emotional resonance guided each action, intertwining spectacle, insight, and responsibility. Every gesture, glance, and movement reinforced the harmony of humor, creativity, and reflection. Moments of reflection reinforced understanding, the wearer realizing that mastery is an integration of freedom, awareness, and empathy. Each playful act carried consequence, every subtle exaggeration had meaning. Friends provided grounding, insight, and shared laughter, reinforcing balance and connection. The antagonist acknowledged skill from afar, assessing without engagement. The mask pulsed in alignment with intention, amplifying clarity, insight, and deliberate action. Streets and objects reflected internal growth, blending play, reflection, and awareness seamlessly. Every interaction carried significance, merging humor, spectacle, and personal growth. The city itself seemed alive, a living testament to lessons learned and subtle mastery achieved. The wearer's movements became instinctive, a blend of creativity, emotional insight, and deliberate intention. Distortions of streets, reflections, and shadows responded dynamically, amplifying mastery and awareness. Friends joined in measured experiments, laughter and insight blending, deepening connection. The antagonist remained a distant presence, a cautionary reminder of ambition unchecked. The mask responded sensitively, amplifying clarity over impulse, transforming intention into playful action. Emotional stakes intertwined with visual play, teaching lessons in responsibility, empathy, and creativity. Streets and objects mirrored growth, skill, and reflection, interactive and alive. Humor, insight, and mastery merged, creating a continuous rhythm of joyful awareness. The city pulsed with soft energy under controlled bursts of creativity, distortions enhancing wonder without chaos. The wearer experimented carefully, exploring imaginative possibilities while maintaining awareness. Friends laughed, participated, and observed, learning balance and creativity together. The antagonist watched silently, testing strategy, patience, and observation without overt interference. The mask responded fluidly to deliberate thought, amplifying precision and insight over recklessness. Streets, reflections, and objects mirrored internal mastery, interactive and responsive. Emotional resonance shaped behavior, integrating spectacle, reflection, and personal growth. Every step, gesture, and glance demonstrated harmony of humor, creativity, and responsibility. Morning light returned, subtle distortions flickering in puddles, reflections shimmering softly in windows. The wearer moved calmly, integrating lessons from past experiences, creativity tempered with awareness. Friends laughed, exploring whimsical possibilities safely, deepening bonds and understanding. The antagonist observed from a distance, noting skill, patience, and subtle mastery without intervention. The mask pulsed in quiet resonance, translating deliberate thought into fluid, playful action. Streets, objects, and reflections responded dynamically, mirroring insight and careful experimentation. Every interaction reinforced growth, empathy, and creativity, blending spectacle with learning. The city, the wearer, and friends existed in quiet harmony, prepared for new adventures shaped by wisdom and imagination. The city shimmered under the morning haze, reflections stretching slightly in windows, streets bending subtly at corners. The wearer walked deliberately, feeling the mask's pulse beneath his skin, a quiet reminder of responsibility and possibility. Small objects responded playfully, a newspaper twisting midair, a lamppost leaning in acknowledgement. Friends followed, laughter soft but genuine, grounding creativity in shared understanding. Shadows stretched and twined, echoing moods and intentions, twisting and contracting like living forms. The wearer sensed harmony between imagination and reality, understanding that awareness enhanced both joy and control. Every gesture carried weight, blending humor, empathy, and reflection seamlessly. Even the smallest details seemed alive, echoing intention and creativity in delicate harmony. Soft sunlight bathed streets and alleys, illuminating subtle distortions, reflections dancing in playful exaggeration. The wearer experimented with measured bursts of imagination, balancing delight and restraint. Friends laughed quietly, exploring tiny marvels, learning rhythm and control in playful exploration. The antagonist observed at a distance, calculating, probing for weakness without overt interference. The mask pulsed fluidly, amplifying deliberate intention over impulsive chaos, translating thought into playful spectacle. Consequences remained gentle yet meaningful, reinforcing lessons of responsibility and insight. Streets, corners, and objects mirrored subtle mastery, a living canvas reflecting awareness and growth. Humor, insight, and reflection intertwined, producing harmony between spectacle and learning. Unexpected shifts tested the wearer, objects reacting unpredictably to subtle fluctuations of thought or mood. He adapted with fluid precision, converting potential disruption into whimsical displays of controlled creativity. Friends supported quietly, laughter merging with guidance, reinforcing balance and awareness. The antagonist's subtle maneuvers tested perception and judgment, evaluating skill without escalation. The mask responded sensitively to deliberate thought, amplifying clarity, focus, and controlled energy. The city became a partner